Thank you so much for joining us on this special episode with Kyle and Ian, the hosts of the Acorn newspaper's Branching Out podcast. For the full episode, go to theacornonline.com/branching-out. The episode's name is Simi Valley Generation Next.
For truth and diversity, come to RadioSimi.
Kyle,
Yes.
start with high energy, okay?
Come on, let's go. Welcome to...
You are listening to Branching Out. It is Monday, February 1st. Congratulations, we've made it through 1/12 of 2021, and if January is any indicator, this ride is not getting any easier.
Not at all.
On today's show, we actually had some pretty big breaking news this morning.
Yes.
In the middle of actually just before our staff meeting, I learned that Scott Erickson, the man who was on the road with Rebecca Grossman the night of the collision that killed Mark and Jacob Iskander, he was charged with reckless driving, which is a misdemeanor. Not huge charges, but still big news.
And we are also going to speak with a special guest, Aleyah Ewing. She is a Simi Valley political activist, and she recently started a podcast about local news, so I'm excited to hear more about that. And
RadioSimi.
Simi Valley editor Sylvie Bellman, who I really want to recognize. She's going to hate me for doing this, but Sylvie, who I've worked with for many, many years, just this week, American citizen.
Really?
Just this week, yep.
Congrats to you, Sylvie.
Passed her test. I didn't put it on social media because I don't know if Sylvie would want me to, but she's been in. She's
Put
been
it out
here.
on our podcast.
Well, I'm not putting the photo up, but yeah, she's been here many, many years. She still has, I think, her Swiss citizenship, but wanted to become a full-fledged citizen and vote. And she was really quiet with everybody about it. She's just like, oh, I have to, I'm not going to be in the office today. And then, boom, I see a photo of her, getting her citizenship. So, okay, just a side note. Well, Sylvie told me about Aleyah. Yeah, well, when I heard she was doing a podcast, we know what that's like.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to have her on.
We are sitting here with Aleyah Ewing, who was not born and raised in Simi Valley. We're not going to hold that against her. Aleyah is the founder of RadioSimi.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Happy to. Tell us, first off, RadioSimi, how long has it been a thing?
Since December. Since December is when we started releasing episodes, but I actually came up with the idea in September.
Were you inspired? I noticed you use Buzzsprout, which we use.
Yes.
Was it an Acorn inspirational moment?
It was not, actually. I didn't learn about the Acorns podcast until Sylvie reached out to me, and she said, oh, hey, have you heard about Branching Out? And I was like, no,
nice
I have.
I
have not. I don't even remember the first half of the question you asked.
No, it doesn't matter. I'm just looking for praise.
But wasn't there... Yeah, let's address it first. It's called RadioSimi. It's not on the radio. It is a podcast.
It is.
But there is a little history there where there was a local radio station that kind of got you the idea that we could at least have local something.
Yes, yeah. So I did want it to be a radio show. So the story is I was on my way to a Christy Smith campaign event. I worked on local campaigns, and they were also there, so I was going as to support my own campaigns. And anyway, so I was driving there, and I was I was picking up food for the campaign event, and I was just flipping through the stations, and I hated all of them. I every single song that came on, I was like, oh my god, this is so obnoxious. And I was thinking I really wish I could just like a playlist, just choose my own music, but it's difficult to sync my phone to the car or whatever, so I didn't want to do all that. But anyways, I was it'd be really cool if we had one where all of the ads were advertised to people in Simi, there's 20% off at Bed Bath & Beyond. That'd be good to know if it was in Simi, right? Because it gives me all these advertisements for LA. I don't live in LA, so it's kind of a waste of time to listen to these advertisements. And so then I was thinking, oh, well, haha, I should, just jokingly, I should make my own radio show, why not, right? And my friend was in the car, and he was like, yeah, do it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Enough talk.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, okay, sure, let me think about it. And I was thinking, well, I know that it's possible to do it because there is already a radio show in Simi Valley, 99.1 The Ranch, right? It works with the government. They host a bunch of different events. And so, I knew it happened, and no offense, I don't like country music.
Yeah.
So
But if
so I
anything,
never
you knew
tuned
they were
in.
hyper-local.
But I
you?
did, yeah. I did know they were local. I knew where their office was and everything like that. So I knew it was possible, right? So anyways, I have a friend, he's like into finance and everything like that. So I asked him to like look into seeing like how much it would cost to start a radio show, how much it would cost for the equipment and everything like that. He figured out that like you have to file an application to the FCC to be able to get radio waves. Anyways, they said during COVID, they're no longer accepting applications. We'd already came up with the name RadioSimi and everything, like we'd already started. And so we were like, oh, well, we'll just keep the name, right? And we'll just move over to a podcast.
I have to say, I appreciate that you, like, because, in this day and age, especially, like, people making music or whatever, it's like, oh, you don't need to have, like, management and go the traditional, like, classic rock route of, like, getting a studio and all that stuff. All this stuff is available, and you looked and said, no, we're going to go traditional with radio.
Exactly.
Like, it's all right there, but you're like, no, let's make this hard.
Exactly.
But it is a podcast, so people explain for someone who hasn't heard it yet what you're trying to do, what the goal is, and what you've kind of done so far.
The radio show idea is different than what we ended up doing for the podcast, right? So originally I wanted to just like, play regular music that you would normally hear on a radio. And then I also wanted to feature local artists at the same time. Because I went to Santa Sue, so all of my friends are like into music. They're starting their own band, right? There's like 20 different local high school bands in Simi Valley. So I've been to a few of their concerts. So I knew that there was a bunch of different artists, right? And
so it was a musical.
Yes, it was originally, yeah. So I wanted to feature local artists. And so then I figured, well, if we're going to start a podcast, I don't want to have it just be a bunch of different music segments back to back. Like that'd get tiring, right? To just listen to different songs, especially if you didn't like one. So instead, I decided to create different segments and then also include a song from like a local musician rather than have the entire show be centered around local musicians. So that's kind of where it started. So what we're doing now is we have a mix between politics, business, local news. We feature some community members as well. So we host interviews of like elected officials, community leaders. We also have this thing called like a 60-second shameless self-promotion because a big part of it, when I was talking about advertisements earlier, a big part of it was because I want to boost Simi's economy because I know that we've been struggling. We've been struggling for a long time. Yep. And so I figured that if we were able to give businesses free advertisement, then that would only be helpful, right? Yep. And not just businesses, but people who are trying to start out like Girl Scout cookies, like people selling Girl Scout cookies, So like
I don't think they need any help those little guys.
No, no probably
pretty
not.
Well.
but just different friends who sell pastries and things like that. Yeah. So I wanted to be able to give them kind of some spotlight.
Promotion.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, where does that level of civic engagement come from? Because most people don't care. They might look at the city and be like, oh, it's really struggling. And you weren't even born there, so like really... No, but really,
let's be clear. She lived
right.
most
No,
of your
I'm
life.
teasing. Before we got on mic, she said she lived in Newbury Park for 3 months. But no, like really, it's impressive to not only care about your town, but to care about your town enough to get engaged in any kind of level, let alone like take it upon yourself to promote businesses and do what you're doing. Is that something your parents instilled in you? You got in school? Like, where's that come from?
Yeah, kind of. So, my family is definitely a family that talks about politics at the dinner table all the time. It's always been that way. And so, growing up, like every kid goes through those different phases of like, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a veterinarian, I want to be the president, right? For me, I went through all those phases, and then right in middle school is when I decided I knew what I wanted to be, and I wanted to be somewhere in public office, right? Something to do with like civic engagement, like what you were talking about. And that was really helpful that I did have a family that was super educated about all those topics because to begin with, I got all my information from them. And then in my freshman year, Donald Trump was elected to president, right? Because of that, that's when I was looking into different political organizations and clubs I could join. My freshman year, I was in debate club, and then I was elected president to be president of debate club for my sophomore year. Santa Sue was trying to shrink down the amount of clubs that we had, so they combined 2 of the debate clubs together. So I became co-president of Junior State of America with another student, and I was in the SoCal chapter. Anyways, so through that and a few different other political organizations in high school, that's kind of where my civic engagement started. And so I did some stuff locally in high school, but not a lot. It wasn't really until the 2020 election that I became to get more involved like locally.
Yeah, yeah. So was there one, do you remember like your first city council meeting or the first time you really, I mean, it's one thing talking about, we know national politics around the table or even maybe the governor of state, but when did you start to plug into, that's what I find fascinating, but really on the local level, city government? Was there one issue,
Yes, it was. And I think everybody from Simi will recall SB 54, which had to do with immigration. It was right when Donald Trump was trying to mass incarcerate, like through ICE, immigrants from Latin America. And because of that, like Simi Valley had an opportunity to basically say that we're a sanctuary city. We're not going to allow ICE to come through and just break up homes and capture people. And we voted against that. So we voted on the side of the Trump administration. And I remember that city council meeting very well. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said, wow, yeah, I remember too. It was there's hundreds of people there.
Yeah, hundreds. And so I did become, that was the first one that I remembered. Yeah. And then probably the one that I remember most after that was the Recall Ruth campaign. And so I remember that one because we had basically almost the same amount of people at SB 54 as we did at the Recall Ruth campaign. And it was funny because the reason Ruth Levinos ran was because of SB 54.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like one, started another.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that's a great example of where really it was national politics that came local. I remember that because, a lot of cities were put in that position to decide. And, even though it's more of a national issue, it brought out tons of people. So since then, and you just said, I need to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. And so tell me about so beyond just being interested in politics, I mean, this last year, you really, an activist is a fair description, right? But you actually got involved in some campaigns and worked with candidates. But what role, when I think about Simi Valley Summer 2020, I'll always think about Black Lives Matter. And I think for people that, that don't know Simi Valley, maybe don't recognize how significant that one event, and Ian was covering.
You guys, I covered the Juneteenth protest in Thousand Oaks. I covered protests in Calabasas, but Simi Valley blew everything out of the water.
1,000 people there.
Huge.
There's a lot of significance. Can you just talk about and you were kind of, I don't want to say at the center of it, but a part of that kind of.
So I had nothing to do with the June 6th protest that you're talking about. That was a young Black woman, Micaiah Foster. We did go to Santa Susana together for 2 years, but we didn't really know each other that well. She graduated from Royal High School, and then she worked with a bunch of different local organizations as well as NAACP to host this giant June 6th protest, right? And I remember when I went there, that was definitely one of the most significant moments of my life because I had never ever once been proud to say that I lived in Simi Valley. And that day I was. That day, it was like seeing a whole new world. Like, I don't want to quote Aladdin, but that's definitely what it felt like. I felt like I was connected with a lot more people than in my entire life. And I that I hadn't known. I didn't know most of the people that were there. And that is kind of what made me realize that there is so much more to do locally than there is nationally.
I just laughing. I just love that kind of backhand. It was the only time I've been proud of living in Simi.
It truly was.
Well, I don't want to turn it into a bash Simi session because you're also very passionate about your town. You said about businesses, but can you explain what you meant by that? I mean, growing up in Simi Valley, I was editor on Simi Valley. It's actually can be a real melting pot. I mean, that's what people forget. It's much more diverse than say definitely Thousand Oaks. I don't know about Moorpark, but close. But yet there is this pervasive conservative Republican territory. That's what it was. What was it like for you growing up there? And do you feel like as having left-leaning politics, your view wasn't being heard or wasn't really listened to?
Yeah. So I actually wrote a paper about the changing political demographics of Simi Valley, and I don't quite remember why I decided to write the paper, but I think a big part of it had to do with seeing how many people went to that Juneteenth protest. You hear about reputation of Simi Valley being conservative, not only just from people within Simi Valley, but from people outside of Simi Valley. I had all these debate conferences that I went to, and every single time I mentioned I'm from Simi Valley, I would get stares and side eye, and I knew what it meant, and I knew people of color felt unsafe driving through Simi Valley. We have those giant Simi supports our cop signs that does nothing but instill fear in people of color, and so I understood where this conservative reputation. I understood why it took place, right? But after that June 6th protest is kind of when I realized, oh crap, that reputation is not at all accurate to what Simi Valley is now, right? When Simi Valley started, it definitely was that Ronald Reagan Foundation, but what it's turned into has turned into this melting pot that you were referring to. I remember Dawn Gray, she ran for mayor in 2018 along with Ruth Levinos and Phil Luce, and she won something along 6,000 votes. Joe Ayala ran for mayor. I forgot to mention, she's a Democrat. And then Joe Ayala is a Democrat. He ran for mayor in 2020, and he earned upwards 20,000 votes. So that's a big increase in terms of Democratic civic engagement between 2018 to 2020. I mean, Katie Hill's also a perfect example of that, right? So as for like growing up in Simi Valley, hearing about this conservative reputation, I think that it affects me and everybody else kind of the same way. I know a lot of people, including myself, had plans of leaving Simi and never coming back. Right? Like leaving Simi Valley, going to college, staying in New York or LA or, Austin, Texas, or basically anywhere but Simi. But after I don't want to say after June 6th, but it was definitely after everything that happened this summer, it was kind of super obvious that Simi Valley had changed.
It's a really uphill battle to change the perception of your city from the inside, but an even bigger one to change your city from the inside, but an even bigger one to change the perception from the outside. And 2020 was a notable election for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was that it had the biggest youth voter turnout ever. How do you keep that momentum going in future elections rather than just this one where it was people stopping Donald Trump?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't even know if I have the answer.
Putting you in the hot seat on it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like...
Or let me rephrase, is that something that you're thinking about or something you're aware of in terms of moving forward?
I'm definitely aware of the changing the national reputation coming second after the local reputation, because I do recognize, and I strongly believe that the national reputation of Simi Valley will not change until the people of Simi Valley change how they feel about Simi Valley, right? And so I think that a big part of that has to do with education, I think, and just awareness in general. I think that when the people of Simi Valley become aware of how much power there actually is that residing within the Democrats, that it'll change our own perceptions of our town. And then when we go out and we talk to our friends outside of the town, it'll kind of snowball out, right? And so the national reputation won't change until Simi changes its own reputation within itself, right? As for Katie Hill and keeping the momentum going, I think there's a lot to be done, both on a national and local level, right? There's the whole $15 minimum wage going on, right? And actual living wages upwards $25 for minimum wage, if we wanted it to keep up with inflation. And that's something that the national level doesn't have to do for Simi Valley to do, right? So to keep the momentum going, I think that kind of people need to remember that they can accomplish things. And I think that comes with tragedies like what we saw in the entirety of 2020, starting with Breonna Taylor. And I think that it comes with tragedy, but I also think it can come with winning. I think that when we see Democrats elected like Katie Hill, right, that gives us kind of enough courage to be able to try and elect our other candidates. I also think that something negative happens where we're like, oh, well, we got, the presidency, and that actually is a phenomenon, where you lose the midterms once you get your candidate elected into office, right?
Right.
That's what you were talking about?
Yeah, we did it, we can all go back to our stuff now.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of, staying engaged is what I'm curious about.
I wish I had a solution, honestly, because I don't think I have one. I think what it's going to come down to is, some people just don't care. And if you get them to care, then you can change the momentum. You can keep it going. But I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that.
Isn't that part of what the podcast is about in terms of just getting, regardless of politics, getting people engaged? And here's local news. Here's what's happening. I did want to speak. I find it so fascinating that you cited now Joe Ayala. He was, could I call him a mentor or an influence? I don't
Both,
okay.
definitely. We joke all the time about he's my second dad. I'm his fourth daughter.
Okay. I have to admit I haven't met him, but he was one of the mayoral candidates we talked about. And I think if you look at who ultimately won some of the local races in Simi Valley in the fall, there weren't as many winners.
It was both it was bittersweet, like seeing the results because we really got the results around November 7th. Is like that's kind of when it was decided what candidates were going to win and what candidates were going to lose, because a lot of the races were really close. Like Phil Luce, when it first started, he was beating Dee Dee Kavanaugh by 12 votes. 12.
That was, I think, one of the closest in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think that for Phil Luce, that was an example of like there just simply wasn't enough votes for Phil Luce's district, right? Like there's a Republican points, like Republicans have more points than Democrats in District 1 of Simi Valley, right? And so for Phil Luce to get that close means that he won Republican seats or Republicans didn't vote, right? And so for him to have lost by just shy, or not just shy, but around 300 votes, to lose by that much, or that by that little, I mean, kind of just shows that there just wasn't enough votes for him to win that race, right? But for other candidates, like you can see that there definitely was enough votes to win that race.
You're involved with Ryan Valencia.
Ryan Valencia is a perfect example. Ryan Valencia lives in a Democrat district, majority Democrat and majority Latino district.
We should say that in Simi Valley, it's broken up by district.
There's 4 districts in Simi Valley, right? Mm-hmm. And in District 3, which is the district Ryan Valencia ran in, it's a majority Democrat and a majority Latino district, and Ryan Valencia is both Latino and a Democrat, so you would think it was a shoo-in, right? Especially considering how hard he worked for months, practically the whole year he worked on this campaign, right? Probably more. And so for that one, that was definitely a devastating loss, because that one, it kind of felt like if Democrats had just rallied behind him some more, like we could have won that seat. Like he had the votes to win because it is a Democrat majority district. Yeah. So I mean that's just all super depressing, but there was wins, right? Bernardo Perez, he ran for college trustee. Sophia Bagdasarian, I was her campaign manager.
Okay, nice. She's on the Simi school board. Oh,
right?
Okay,
yes.
Yep.
So I was her campaign manager. She got elected to the Simi school board. I think that one was definitely surprising to a lot of people because that is a Republican majority district.
So who was second in that race?
It was Rocky Rhodes. So it went Sophia, Rocky Rhodes, and
hard to beat a great name.
And then
like
Jonathan
Rocky
Bonesteel.
Rhodes.
Yeah, right. And Jonathan Bonesteel. Like that's powerful names. Powerful names.
Yeah. So it wasn't all losses. So there was.
It was. Yeah.
And so how are you? Give me an idea. I mean, so early with RadioSimi. Are you starting to get some feedback? How are you getting it out there? I mean, what have you heard so far?
I just found out that we're on Apple Podcasts, which I didn't know. So, like, when you set it up through Buzzsprout, I'm sure you guys know, you can set it up through multiple directories, right?
No, I was going to ask exactly that because I was on your website. I'm like, I don't see Apple Podcasts. Why would they not be on Apple Podcasts?
I don't have an Apple phone. I have a Samsung. I'm like Samsung, Google,
Get out.
everything.
Leave. Branding this.
I hate the Apple company. I think it's evil. Anyways.
I fully agree with you.
He says with his MacBook in front of us.
It's easy for music.
So anyways, while we were setting up Buzzsprout, we went through multiple directories, and I found out that, like, we were on Apple Podcasts. I didn't know that because when I had logged it in, I had to log in through somebody else's Apple because you have to have an Apple account to set it up through Buzzsprout. Well, I didn't have an Apple account, so I had to set it up using somebody else's, and I never got a confirmation email. So I never knew. I just assumed it was, like, still in the loading process until somebody I knew was looking through Apple Podcasts for our show, and apparently we have a rating. We have a 5-star rating, and that's the only rating we have on any of ours, but it's 5 stars, so I'm going to say we have 100% 5-star guaranteed show.
Take it where you can get it. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So what, we know you're a college student now at American University. You're doing remote now? Is that?
Yeah, everything's virtual.
Okay. So what does that mean? We talked a little bit about this, but for the future of the show, how do you hope to keep it going? What's your kind of timeline right now? Have you thought that far ahead?
I have thought that far ahead for about a year. So the way it's looking right now is that American University, the fall is also going to be online. They like to say, it'll probably be in person, but the way the COVID numbers are going right now, the way the vaccination numbers are going right now, the fact that GW, which is another school in D.C., said that they're going to have the fall be online, kind of just all points to the fact that the fall is going to be online. So that's how my family has been preparing for it. Yeah. So for like at least another year, I'll probably still be in Simi Valley. So I expect RadioSimi to go on with me and Dayton as a host for another year. After this, Dayton also plans on moving out to his college. I'll move out to my college. But like RadioSimi won't stop just because me and Dayton leaves, right? Yeah. There are a ton of amazing people on our team. Like, you can check it out, like, on our website, like, how awesome these people are. And I just know that, like, any one of them would be interested in taking over the host of the show, because they already do a lot behind the scenes, right? Like, we have people researching content and everything like that. The only part is that they're not speaking, right? And that's probably the easiest part of the show, is to just, like, speak into a microphone,
that's
right?
What we're missing.
We need one of those.
Yeah, seriously.
That's hilarious. So they've done more succession planning than branching out, which decides to fold up.
For our listeners who aren't aware, Kyle and I get together Thursday afternoon, like, what we could do tomorrow. I don't know, boo-boo.
No, don't say that. Don't give away
Well, that's better than me and Dayton, because we show up on Sunday and figure it out on Sunday what we're gonna do. We do it. We spend it between 1 to 4 p.m. And from 1 to 2 we write the content. 2 to 3 we speak. 3 to 4 we interview people, and then I go home and edit it.
Wow.
That's still better than us. Sunday, like, we do this, and then I go home and do nothing until Sunday when Kyle's like, "What's the show?" And then he
texts me, "When are you going to check? When are you going to check the show?" Are you enjoying it? I mean, what is it like? Because you had guests already. You already had Councilmember Ruth on, right?
Mm-hmm.
She,
yeah.
You know, it's a pretty big deal. So you're already getting elected figure. I mean, are you enjoying it? I mean, you're so new into it. Are you liking?
I am. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I'm not like some big, powerful person that can, I just pull off, city council members and Chief Livingstone. It's like 100%, like, throughout the last 6 months, like, I've become friends with these people. Yeah. So it's more like me asking them a favor. Hey, would you mind coming on my show? Less of a, would you do me the honor of, showing up?
We get that.
As you get more of them, I'm sure it'll encourage others to be like, oh, look, all these people have done their show. She seems fair. They've all said rave things about her. Why don't I go?
Right. That is the idea. Because me and Dayton are both Democrats, it's of course going to be difficult to try and get conservative people to come and speak on our show. But we do. Bob Huber, he's the Ventura County District 4 supervisor, so he oversees Simi Valley. He was the former mayor of Simi Valley. He's a strong Republican. Kate O'Brien, she's a park board member along with Brian Dennert and Josh Gray, who we already interviewed. She's a libertarian. We had our second episode was with Andrew Young. I went to school with him. The reason I actually asked him to come on my show is because he's libertarian as well, and I knew that he could kind of speak a lot about that, so I had him come on our show. Oh, wow. And then I also have John Tolson. He's also conservative. He's currently one of the planning commissioners. He was just appointed to be vice chair. Congrats to him. And so he's...
I love that
so
she knows this kind of stuff. What are you're 19?
18.
18. Who else knows that name?
Well, so I'm curious, because it's not a news show. You're not doing anything to hide your politics.
No,
or remain neutral.
Definitely not.
So when these people come on, is it like a crosstalk kind of thing where you're challenging them on it, or are you giving them a platform to share their view? Like, what is it?
It's definitely the latter. So we don't want to necessarily challenge them because we disagree. Like, we don't disagree, because we absolutely do disagree. I disagreed with a lot of what Chief Livingstone said, right? Yeah. And so I'm not going to go out of my way to try and challenge them, though, because a big purpose of our podcast is to educate the people who listen to it, right? And what are they going to learn if they're just hearing me and somebody else arguing, right? You're not going to learn anything other than the fact that I don't agree with this person, and that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is absolutely to give them a platform to share what they're feeling, and then our listeners, hearing my own opinions and then that person's opinions, can kind of make their own judgments as to who they agree with more, or at the very least, better understanding their elected officials and community members' opinions.
I'm sure it does a lot to build bridges as well, or at least show people, like, look, we disagree, but we're a community.
It definitely does, yeah. One of the core aspects of RadioSimi is to unify our community. All right, that's a little difficult to do when you fall into, like, morally, you fall completely different lines, and so because of that, we won't have particular people on our show, simply because, like, that's not necessarily something you want to, like, unify. It's too far off to try and unify. Yeah. But definitely people who are super respectable in our community, like Kate O'Brien and like John Tolson, right? Yeah. They're always respectable regardless of who they're talking to, and that's the kind of people we want to unify, because we want to kind of spread love and cheer, right? And so we don't want to try and cause any negativity, even if some of the topics we talk about are negative, right? Yeah. The idea overall is just to spread happiness.
I think that's something that's lost a lot these days, is that you can disagree with somebody, but it doesn't mean you have to, like, dislike them for it. Like, you can respectfully disagree with somebody. And I don't see a lot of that these days, so good on you. Good on you guys.
It's definitely difficult, because it's like, how do you really define an opinion, right? Like, the whole, do you like green tea or black tea versus, like, do do you think immigrants should be held in cages at the border? Like, it's different between like these disagreements aren't really disagreements. Like they do fall on like the moral lines, like what I was talking about. But I do think that there's an aspect of like you can disagree on taxes in Simi Valley, for example. And I think that that's some place that we can definitely find common ground on. And then once we kind of get into that common ground arena, then that's when we can have a healthy conversation regarding these two different, issues. And then, hopefully we can just make compromises to the point where we get into a healthy place in Simi Valley.
Is that green tea, black tea question like one of your icebreakers?
It definitely is not, no. I'm team green tea, though, for sure.
Okay. All right.
Get on a little soapbox. I mean, I'm so excited about what you're doing because we talk about it on the show and we talk about the Acorn all the time about how we're going to get young people engaged,
Usually while shaking our canes.
Yeah, in our newspapers. But yeah, I think it's I'd like to think it wouldn't require partisanship to get young people engaged. But the reality, I want them to see that what happens at a local level reverberates, right? And especially in Simi, when we're talking about the Simi Valley Police Department and their connection to the council. I mean, those are one and the same. So I'm just excited about the idea of hopefully, one person tuning into your podcast and saying, gosh, I want to know more. And maybe they pick up the Acorn. They pick up the Star. At least they're getting more information because you just find it's really hard. It's easy to get people excited about the presidential race or the Senate. But city council is a real challenge. And I'm glad that you seem like committed to that. And I would encourage you to keep trying to, get people to understand because it's a big deal. And I just all the different candidates, we saw so many different people, faces in this year's Simi Valley race. I got to say, I've been already on the record saying the districting system, I'm a little bit, I don't know if it's the right thing for TO. I think it's for each community. But I can't argue with you. Seems like there's a real variety and different perspectives that maybe we hadn't seen when it was still at large. I mean, I know you weren't voting then, but that's good to see, and that's good for Simi Valley.
Do you have a dream guest or like somebody you've got your eye on that maybe you don't think you're big enough to get to yet? Or just somebody you'd love to sit down with and get on the show?
Definitely two. One, and they're going to be probably surprising. Elaine Litzer, who
totally
is definitely. It's not like she's like too out of our league or anything like that. It's definitely difficult to try and get conversations with city council members, right? Especially when you've had run-ins where you disagreed with council members before. When you've showed up to city council meetings, kind of chewing them out, it makes it difficult.
I remember
to kind of exactly to try and build that relationship where they'd be willing to come on your show. So she's definitely someone that I'm really hoping one of these days I can have a positive relationship where enough to the point where she comes on our show. And then the other one is Katie Hill. Of course, I love Katie Hill, right? I always did. I supported a lot of her opinions when she was running for office, as well as when she became an elected official. Yeah. So for me, she's also a part of the reason I became involved in local politics. I definitely, along with a lot of other people, I looked up to her. Right? Like she was, she was young, bisexual. She had all of these progressive ideas, and especially for such a Republican conservative reputation like we have in Simi Valley, it was definitely inspiring to watch her get elected. And so she has her own podcast called Naked Politics. I talked about it on episode, I think, 1 or 2, but anyways, she's definitely somebody that I would love to have on our show, just that I could meet her, and talk to her.
She's pretty accessible, I will say. I know Sylvie did a really long interview with her at one point, so I was really impressed to see that. So, all right, well, hey, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to hang out with a couple other podcasters. We're hoping for a little cross promotion. Right, get a branching out plug maybe on RadioSimi. But yeah, thanks for coming out here. I'm just, you got big things ahead, I can tell, obviously. I'm hoping you stick around. I guess that will be the big question when you do go back to school. You talked about never wanting to maybe come back. Will you or will you not? I'm sure that's still up in the air. But
yeah, well, I do plan on coming back at the very least to spend time with my family because, they're all from here, so I definitely want to come back at least to spend time with them, and then whether or not my future stays here, like that'll just kind of depend on where Simi's at the time.
So real quick before you go, what's your social media handles?
So you can find our website at RadioSimi.com. You can also find us on Instagram at RadioSimi, on Facebook at RadioSimi, and on Twitter at Real RadioSimi. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, have a good one. So not to make it an age thing, but it's just really impressive to see somebody at 18 who knows what they're doing and is passionate about it and can like throw down conversationally. Like when I don't know about you, but when I was 18, I didn't know anything.
I mean, she's certainly, her ideas about local politics and the people and what goes on there. I mean, it really belies her age. I mean, she really gets it. She's plugged in that way, and you really don't see that.
No, I'm 30 years old, and I feel weird. When I started getting city council members and mayor's phone numbers in my phone, it was kind of like, ooh, like this feels cool.
Yeah.
And I had to remind myself, like, you're 30, like you're a grown-up. This is a thing that's normal for grown-ups.
Yeah, she's already there at 18.
Yeah.
And if she can inspire just a few more like her, how different things would be. I knew we were in for an interesting guest when she described herself as kind of badass in our pre-interview. So I said, I think she's gonna be a good fit for the show.
She definitely is. Most people who say that about themselves, I don't think are. But she definitely
lived up to it, right?
She lived up to it and then some.
So that was great. So again, thanks for Sylvie for helping set that up. Look forward to our next guest, but we will sign off for this week. As always, your co-host Kyle Jory. You know where to find me at Kyle B. Jory on Twitter.
This is Ian Bradley. You can find me on Twitter at Ian_reports. Aleyah definitely gave you all the social media handles for RadioSimi. Check them out. It's just, I'm a big fan of DIY, and they are definitely doing it for themselves. So check them out. Otherwise, we will see you all next week.
Okay, cool.